I'm going to read the list. George Molnar, David Weeks, Yossi Bengal, Edmund Rose, Ronald Creed, Ruth Kadish, happy birthday on the 15th. Anthony Bordelais, Esther Frank, Sarah Gold, Jean Claridge, she's not here tonight, but hers is on the 27th. Dana Elfont, David Finkel, Susan Loria, Frank Mandelbaum, and Lee Bricker. So happy birthday, Yom Huledet Sameach to all of you. I'll teach you the Israeli one day. I used to teach the preschoolers at the J. It's got a whole different tune. And the readers tonight are, let me pull this out, are Audrey Pleasant, Bruce Hillenberg, Marty Bernstein, Howard Himmelho, Rabbi Miriam Jerris, Gail Whitty, and Lonnie Fleischer. And lighting the candles tonight are Charlie and Suzanne Paul. Well, don't get up quite yet, because I'll do that first reading. Then you don't have to stand up like awkwardly while I do it. Light. Light has long been our people's symbol of hope and renewal. A reminder that even in darkness, we hold the power to bring light into our lives and the world. We welcome Shabbat with light, filling our homes, our communities with warmth, peace, and a sense of purpose. May the glow of our Shabbat candles remind us of the strength we carry within and the responsibilities we share with one another. May their light bring joy to our hearts and clarity to our minds. And as the flames rise, may they inspire us to act with courage, compassion, and urgency, bringing light to those who need it most. Now I invite you to come light candles.
Baruch haor ba'olam, Baruch haor ba'adam, Baruch haor ba'shalom, ba'shalom, Baruch haor, Baruch haor, Shabbat.
Shabbat Shalom. Our ancestors hallowed the Sabbath day. In dark times, it was a refuge for them, and in times of prosperity, it gave them rest and joy. As a community, we celebrate the opportunity to gather in that spirit, even as we imagine Shabbat anew. May we too find rest from the day's work and refuge from our cares. May we too feel the warmth of love and companionship. May we too feel our joys heightened and our sorrows softened by the love we give and receive.
May we be blessed with Shabbat joy.
May we be blessed with Shabbat peace. May we be blessed with Shabbat light.
Lachuna ranana, lachuna ranana, lachuna ranana la Shabbat. Lachuna ranana, lachuna ranana, lachuna ranana la Shabbat. Naria, naria, ya yom simchatenu, nigat ma b'shalom. Naria, naria, la yom simchatenu, bizmirot naria lo. Lachuna ranana, lachuna ranana, lachuna ranana la Shabbat. Lachuna ranana, lachuna ranana, lachuna ranana la Shabbat.
To cross the threshold of this room on Shabbat is to enter a place free from the demands of our everyday lives. We step away from our daily routines in an attempt to gain perspective on where we have been and where we are going. At other times, in other places, we may feel fragile and alone. Yet here we join together to find strength, to build community, as we look with wonder at the universe and seek our place within its vastness. To this place we come to lengthen our perspective.
To this place we come to question and explore.
In this place we awaken our imaginations.
In this place we draw strength as we allow ourselves to dream.
Together we share the challenge of an ever-changing world, a world often beyond our control. Together we seek to find meaning, calming our anxieties, understanding our purpose. Together we share the burdens and blessings of responsibility. Together we bond as a community, a true gift of Shabbat.
Ma tovu oalecha Yaakov, oalecha Yaakov, mishkinoteka Yisrael. Ma tovu oalecha Yaakov, oalecha Yaakov, mishkinoteka Yisrael. Likrat Shabbat, לכו ונלכה, לכו ונלכה, כי מקור הברכה, מקור הברכה. מה טובו אוהליך יעקב, אוהליך יעקב, משכנותיך ישראל. מה טובו אוהליך יעקב, אוהליך יעקב, משכנותיך ישראל.
We say what we believe what we say. As humanistic Jews, we do not plead for supernatural intervention to bring healing to those who are ill or injured. We seek to be present for them in the hope that this will contribute to their recovery. We do not ask that our dead find protection under divine wings of mercy. We acknowledge that the dead are gone and that caring for their survivors is what now matters. We do not look to the heavens to send us peace. We recognize that as an exclusively human as an exclusively human responsibility. We use our communal rituals and celebrations to empower ourselves. By gathering to affirm what we believe about the nature of reality and the responsibilities of humanity, we are strengthened. For the humanistic Jewish believer, this is the essence of what some call the religious experience. Surrounded by a like-minded community, we are liberated to say what we really believe. Then, strengthened by each other, we can better manifest our beliefs in the world each and every day. Very well
נפתח לנו שערי צדק חן וחסד ורחמים. נפתח לנו שערי צדק חן וחסד ורחמים. אלה שערים לשלום נפתח Niftach lanu v'navovam ele sharim la shalom. Niftach lanu v'navovam Niftach lanu sha'arei tzedek chen v'chesed v'rachamim. Niftach lanu sha'arei tzedek chen v'chesed v'rachamim.
On Shabbat, we pause to reflect. Where is my light? The light that carries me forward, that brightens my path even in uncertain times. It is here within me. Where is my hope? The hope that sustains me, that reminds me tomorrow can be better, that we can build a world of justice and kindness. It is here within me. Where is my strength? The strength to stand firm in my values, to face difficulties with courage, to reach out a hand to another. It is here within me. As we welcome Shabbat, let us embrace this truth. We are not alone. The light, the hope, and the strength we seek are not distant. They are already here within us, waiting to be recognized, nurtured, and shared.
Efori oribi, efo tikvati, tikvati bi, efo kochi, kochi bi, vegam bach, efo kochi, kochi bi, vegam bach. Where is my light? My light is in me. Where is my hope? My hope is in me. Where is my strength? My strength is in me and in you, and in you. Where is my strength? My strength is in me and in you, and in you.
If I am not for myself, who will be for me? If I am only for myself, what am I? And if not now, when? These words of Rabbi Hillel resonate across millennia. They challenge us to turn inward, to strengthen ourselves and our communities. In times of threat and uncertainty, they remind us that taking care of ourselves and our communities need not be selfish. Yet Rabbi Hillel reminds us that turning inward cannot be our entire story. It is but the beginning of a greater call, a foundation upon which we can build our connection to others. As we contemplate this wisdom, may we find strength in its inspiration and the courage to begin with ourselves, knowing that this is the first step toward everything else.
Im einani li mili, ukshayani le'atzmi amani, ve'im lo akshav, matai, bechal dov adov vayadam lirot etz atzmo, כאילו הוא יצא ממצרים. אם אני לי מי לי, וכשאני לעצמי מה אני, ולא עכשיו אימתי, ואם לא עכשיו אימתי,
Rabbi Tarfon said, "You are not required to finish the work, but neither are you free to desist from it." In the vastness of our responsibilities, it can be tempting to feel overwhelmed. Rabbi Tarfon reminds us that while we cannot do everything, we can and must do something. We are not required to solve every problem, but neither can we turn away. The work of improving our world, of caring for ourselves and for others, is ongoing. And while the path may seem endless, every step matters. Let his wisdom guide us as we take those steps, knowing that the act of beginning is what makes the journey possible.
לא עליך המלאכה לגמור, לא עליך לגמור, לא עליך המלאכה לגמור, לא עליך לגמור, ולו אתה בן חורין לבטל ממנם, ולא אתה בן חורין, ולא אתה בן חורין לבטל ממנם, ולא אתה בן חורין. לא עליך המלאכה לגמור, לא עליך לגמור, לא עליך המלאכה לגמור, לא עליך לגמור.
In the pursuit of a just world, may we hold fast to the ideals that give life its deepest meaning. Among these are the courage to hope, even when hope is scarce, to dream of peace, even when surrounded by uncertainty. Though the path to peace may be long, let us never lose sight of it. May we remember that peace is not only the absence of struggle, but the fullness of life that blossoms from justice, security, and compassion. Wherever there are struggles to achieve such a peace, let wisdom always guide our actions. May we be vessels of peace, always carrying it in our hearts and minds, even when we seek to protect what we hold dear. And may the world we leave behind be one that reflects our highest ideals: freedom, understanding, and enduring harmony among all people.
נעשה שלום, שלום בעולם, נעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל העולם, ואמרו שלום. נעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל העולם, ואמרו שלום. נעשה שלום, שלום בעולם, נעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל העולם, ואמרו שלום.
In this community where we find strength and common purpose, we turn our minds and hearts toward all those who need our love and support. those who are ill, those who suffer pain of the body or spirit, those who are lonely, those who have been wronged. Tonight, our well wishes are extended to these members of our community and their loved ones, to Joe Barkley, Lee Bricker, Susan Lipson, Jim Walker, and Stacy Wolf-Lark. And if there's someone whom you're thinking about, we'll go around the room. Anybody on this side? Marion?
I have three. One is for your
Okay.
The other is Stephanie Flack and Donna Francis.
Thank you. Anyone else on this side? Yes?
Grace Murphy. Linda Pocock and Jan Rosner.
Thank you. Howard?
And Martha.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead, Linda. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off. Anybody else on this side? Yes, go ahead.
Diane Polish. Edith Code.
Did we miss anyone at all? May all who suffer know that they are not alone, that we are there. May they be healed quickly. May they experience a complete recovery, refuah shlema, the renewal of their bodies and the renewal of their spirits.
מקום הכוח בתוכנו, מקורות הברכה מעברותינו. May the source of strength that dwells so deep within us help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing. And let us say, Shalom. Mekom hakoach betochenu, Mokorot habracha mevrotenu. May those in need of healing know refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Shalom.
When cherished ties are broken and the chain of love is shattered, only trust and the strength of friends can lighten the heaviness of the heart. At times, the pain of separation seems more than we can bear, but if we dwell too long on our loss, we embitter our hearts and harm ourselves and those about us. The psalmist said that in his affliction, he learned the law of life and death, and in truth, grief is a great teacher when it sends us back to serve and care for the living. We learn how to counsel and comfort those who, like ourselves, are bowed with sorrow. We learn when to keep silence in their presence and when a word will assure them of our love and concern. Thus, even when they are gone, the departed are with us, moving us to live as, in their higher moments, they themselves wished to live. We remember them now and always. They live in our hearts. They are an abiding presence.
As our thoughts turn to those who are no longer with us, we remember our own loved ones, those whom our friends and neighbors have lost, the martyrs of our people whose graves are unmarked, and those of every people and nation whose lives have been a blessing to humanity. As we do so, we meditate on the meaning of love and loss, of life and death. We recall now our loved ones whom death has taken from us, those who died at this season in years past, and all those whom we have taken into our hearts with our own. Tonight, we observe the yard sites of these beloved members of our community and their dear ones, Raquel Boguslavskaya, Neil Bricker, Donald J. Bernstein, Charlene Coburn, Celia DeZoden, Mark Jarris, Dr. Lawrence Klein, Henry Liebhaber, and Bernard Malinsky, As we did earlier for those who are ill, once again, if there's someone you're remembering, please, if you'd like to share their name. Anybody on this side? Esther?
Dave Rosenstein, Angie Witkowski, and Pat Caputo.
Thank you. Bruce?
I would just like to say that in the weeks before this, in the weeks to come, with civil wars and large wars all around the world, there's going to be death from innocent people dying, and it's breaking my heart. And I'm so sad that enlightenment and humanism have not been able to prevent this. And I just feel like the idea of enlightenment and humanism not being able to prevent this is a death in my heart. And so that's what I'm feeling.
If you can do so comfortably, in their memory, please rise as together we recite the humanistic interpretation of Kaddish. Nit gadal v'nit kadash beruach ha'adam. Let us dignify and ennoble all people in the spirit of our shared humanity. Let us acclaim the preciousness of life. Let us show gratitude for life by approaching it with reverence. Let us embrace the whole world, even as we wrestle with its parts. Let us each, in our own way, take up our share in serving the world and seeking truth. May our commitment to life help us to strengthen healing of spirit and peace of mind. May justice and peace permeate and comfort the house of Israel and all those who dwell on earth. And let us say, Ken Yehi, may it be so. Please be seated. All right. We'll see you then. All right, tonight we're going to talk about this. So I originally had thought maybe I could get some highlights from this discussion, but while it was filmed, they only made available to us an audio recording. So first, let me tell you who are the stars of our show tonight, and I will represent their ideas and a little bit of critique and interpretation. On our left there is somebody you probably already knew. Jeffrey Goldberg is the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic, one of the country's best-known journalists. He's also has an extraordinary Jewish background and is deeply steeped in both the Jewish community, the Jewish world, and affairs in Israel and so forth. He wrote for publications like The New Yorker, The Washington Post, and in addition to covering issues of Jew hatred, he's covered American democracy and global affairs. We won't hear quite as much from him because he was mostly asking the questions, but I'll share some of his insights too. The entire series and this podcast, this wonderful podcast, that's their logo up there, Identity Crisis. I put the link in the newsletter if you want to listen to it. Did anybody have a chance? Nah, all right, you wanted to hear me say everything. I have to tell you, their voices were so similar, it was a little hard for me, but I found the transcript. Identity Crisis is produced along with an enormous amount of programming, deep thinking, and other kinds of Jewish learning by the Shalom Hartman Institute. It's a pluralistic Jewish think tank. It's an educational institution dedicated to Jewish thought and to ethics in Israel and contemporary Jewish identity. It was founded in Jerusalem, although it has a major presence in the diaspora, particularly in the United States. It brings together scholars, rabbis, educators. I've had the privilege of participating in some of their programs from across the Jewish world to consider major issues facing Judaism and Jewish life. Highly influential. In fact, what prompted me to talk about this particular podcast, this particular interview, was not just that it was Jeffrey Goldberg who did it, so it got a lot of attention from that. It was, by the way, conducted at the newish Jewish Museum in D.C., where that horrible, tragic shooting also took place. But it made headlines because afterwards, Yehuda Kurtzer, oh, I didn't tell you who he is. Yehuda Kurtzer began talking about the sort of the political homelessness that many Jews are feeling. And, you know, you don't have to share these feelings. I do feel this, and some of you know it. But other people feel different. But we're going to talk about ideas. And if there's time, of course, we'll have some questions. Mostly, probably, we'll save it for the oneg. So the guy who looks a little more like me, Wow, scarily like me. That's Yehuda Kurtzer. He's the current president of the Shalom Hartman Institute, and really an outstanding scholar of Jewish thought and contemporary Jewish life, writes and lectures all over the place. Particular interests in Jewish peoplehood, which, as you know, is part of my particular interest too, Zionism, liberalism, but keep in mind, we're not talking about political liberalism tonight. We're talking about open-mindedness, the kind of classical liberalism that this country was built on, and that will come up. He hosts this podcast, of course, in general, although he was interviewed that night, and he is really one of the most profoundly effective Jewish voices on issues of Jewish ethics, leadership, and all of the other kinds of challenges that we have, including the challenges facing liberal democracy and, indeed, Jewish identity. So what I'm actually going to start with, though, because since I didn't get to have the opportunity to show you a video of it, I'm going to start with a joke that Yehuda taught, and I'll try to deliver it the way he did because I have it verbatim. He says to Jeffrey Goldberg, you know the old Jewish joke, right? Max meets Sam in the park and says, Sam, it's been so long. In one word, how are you doing? And he says, in one word, good. He says, oh, that's wonderful. I'm so happy to hear it. In 2 words, not good. It's the classic Jewish joke. Okay, so the first thing, slide 1, if you will, Arthur. Now, these are just to remind you where we are, more to remind me where we are. There's not going to be a lot of content, a key quote, and so forth. But let's first talk about this first topic that they addressed. So I'm really going to read this stuff to you, and I'm going to stop periodically and comment on it. Why this joke? Well, as he points out, as American Jews, we have to simultaneously acknowledge that the conditions under which we have flourished in America are unique. They truly are, by the way, unique, and without precedent in any diasporic community in history. I feel like that's the good, but it's also the not good. How, he asks, do I simultaneously say American Jews have experienced more affluence, influence, power, and privilege in the most successful assimilated diaspora project in Jewish history? Unprecedented insiderness, unprecedented accomplishment in terms of institution building and flourishing and social acculturation, accommodation, assimilation. America stands out as an exceptional diaspora Jewish experience compared to diasporas all over the world, but also diaspora communities in history. So he asks, how do I talk about that at the same time that it feels for many American Jews like the sky is falling? This has always been an emphasis of mine. I happen to believe in American exceptionalism. If you don't, we can argue about it another time. But I happen to believe in it. And I emphasize this in my American Judaism class, which we get a pretty good subscription for. Even after 2 years, we've still got a lot of people showing up, people who are in this room. Some of you listen even on the Zoom machine. That uniqueness was, as he'll point out shortly, also built by us. And that's unique. There is no other country, no other diaspora on earth, Israel being an exception because it's a Jewish country, where the Jews have had this much influence on creating what the country should be. In every way. In ways that some of us might not approve of today, but in many, many ways that we would. Some that we brag about quite frequently. But yet, today, not just looking at the diaspora communities across the world, many of which are in a horrible, horrible condition. England comes to mind. Canada, by the way, also comes to mind. Another shooting, a pellet gun, aimed at Torontonians as they were going about their business in a Jewish neighborhood near synagogues just a day or so ago. And it's one of many, 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 an 8-fold increase. We, however, are also facing it, and I don't need to tell anybody in Detroit what that means because, well, we watched the headlines of it in stark and horrible fear that the preschoolers at Temple Israel, which, by the way, from my perspective, not only led their congregation with such power and inspiration, but I think led our entire community that way, and I want to give that congratulations. I wrote them a letter thanking them for that because I think it was that important. All right, so we'll turn to page 2, because this is really the problem that's being laid out. And we know that there is a moment though it wasn't really the moment, because much of this was already happening, that set off the worst of it. And I happen to have spoken about it on the 13th day of the month of October in 2023. That was the moment that many things clicked for me. I spoke about it again in February 24. I remember the exact date because my children were in town visiting. And it's what Jeffrey Goldberg, speaking about some scholars, one in particular, Frank Foer, who wrote about this, and asking Yehuda, did October 7th leash forces that have led to what many of us would identify as not a perfect, completely wonderful time for American Jews, because we've always had challenges, even here as Americans, but a place, a time that we might in the future, and some of us already are calling the Golden Age. Is it over? This is part of what they ask. Now, Yehuda Kurtzer replies, there's no question that you have to look, and we do throughout history, for those periodized moments. We also know that so many of the things that are being unleashed in this country about Jews and about Jews worldwide long precede October 7th. So what October 7th did is it provided a kind of permission. Its aftermath has become the kind of obvious permission structure for certain types of, he said Jew hatred, but as you know, I like to put it all under anti-Semitism. This idea of a permission structure is something I spoke about on the High Holidays, and I explained it at the time. It's when society allows, well, there's something that political theorists call the Overton window to move. Everybody knows these things now that were like little secrets of people who studied this before happen to know. The Overton window is what's acceptable to talk about publicly. And the kind of degradation of Jews in every type of way, and I'm not talking about criticism of the government of Israel, we'll get to that. I'm talking about destruction of Israel, mythology about Jews, that we control things, that we're everybody's problem. And if you're on social media, I know Facebook feeds you a much more tailored kind of experience, so maybe you're only seeing your bubble. But I happen to be in certain kinds of social media places, and we'll talk about that a little bit more too, where I see the worst of the worst. A music listing, I'll give you a better one. A post was 3 years old from a young woman who was in a TV show, happens to be Jewish, talking about her boobies, gefilte fish or matzo ball soup. Thousands of hateful comments. Thousands of hateful comments from the left and from the right. Stunned me. What he says, Kurtzer, is that it would be more responsible for us to say what have been the processes over the past 20 or 30 years that have begun to alter the dynamic of who American Jews are as authors of our own story as it's unfolding. And here he talks a little bit more about the Golden Age, but then goes on to say, my only dissent with that piece, the one by this Frank Foer, on the end of the Golden Age, is that what I feel is not fully represented in that story was a kind of appreciation, and I've already foreshadowed this for you in my comments, of what American Jews had done, what we did for this country, rather than an appreciation of the social and cultural position to which we had arrived. That has been diagnosed well. We've gotten to a place of this kind of comfort, and lo and behold, that comfort is going away. But slide 3. Oh, there we go. American Jewish success was created, not granted. The different way to look at it, and this is what's so important to me, is what did American Jews do from the first half of the 20th century, and I would argue earlier too, when we didn't have the insiderness or the influence, but we did have the values. It was a much smaller Jewish community until the 20th century. But what did we do that led to that period of flourishing? And what then becomes our responsibility to do as American Jews as we notice these erosions and ask, how can we reverse them? So we know about structural anti-Semitism. It existed before, he reminds us, in the Ivy Leagues, until those quotas broke. Those quotas were created for a reason, by the way, because there were a lot of Jews getting in, and it was just too many for them. Instead of Jews saying, as we could have, I guess they don't want us anymore, let's just send our kids to Vanderbilt and to Mississippi State, which is kind of what's happening right now, by the way. They asked instead, what do we need to do to find our way into those systems? And that was the question that American Jews asked. He's right. But we asked the second question, he points out, equally important. We asked this: what can we do to make America different? He puts it this way: American Jews played an outstanding and exceptional role in doing the work of defining a version of America that America would need to be able to accommodate Jews as insiders. That's not a coincidence. We looked at what we needed, and we saw it was what others needed too. We saw that our fight was not our fight alone. Now, whether that's true or not anymore, we can argue about that. I have opinions about it. But at that time, as he points out, American Jews, and it even started earlier than the 20th century, embraced America's promise. I would say that idea, and you should not associate it with one president because it goes back to the beginning of the Republic, of the city on the hill, is an aspiration that American Jews adopted, knowing that it would help us, but that would raise America to be what it could be and should be. He points out it's not a coincidence that American Jews like Horace Callan is the author of the idea of cultural pluralism for America itself. It's not a coincidence, and we just studied her in my class. We studied her from an intensely Jewish point of view. And Emma Lazarus, by the way, was an intensely Jewish person. One of the first Zionists, by the way. You may not have known that. But she also becomes a prophet, as it were, who is now identified with telling a story about America that accommodates the newcomers, the immigrants. He goes on to speak this way, that Jews write the soundtrack to American patriotism. We engage in that project, and that is all true. The thing that I think the American Jewish community, he says, has let go of is that we did become comfortable. Just as saying, well, now we're insiders to the project. We no longer need to be active creators of the American story for America. And it doesn't just mean for him fighting for this cause or that cause. We all fight for causes. In my opinion, what he's saying is that this is almost a larger cause, the cause of Americanism. And that goes beyond, and in fact may contradict what some of us do on all sides of our political spectrums as Jews. He said we no longer need to be creators of the American story. We feel that we just need to sit on our laurels and take part in it. And we do take part of it, and we should, he points out, be able to do that. But he also points out that we need to write the story of America to make ourselves included in it. Too many have forgotten our contributions, and they were not small, particularly considering the smallness of our community. But it is the American Jews, the way that American Jews turned America into an exceptional diaspora, unlike any other diaspora. Okay, so on slide 4, we've gone to the next topic. And this is where we get into the real title of the podcast episode. And Jeffrey Goldberg says, in your view, is the illiberalism that a lot of people sense in American life and see every day, I don't want to say marginalization, but the troubles that Jews are feeling, is that just a byproduct of the larger illiberal project? But then, after Yehuda Kurtzer says he thinks so, but then says Jeffrey Goldberg, what do you say to the people on a very potent Jewish right, and there is a right, who say that it's actually the liberals who are turning against us? He says you think of the Ivy League as a bastion of the left, even leftism, not liberalism. And those are the places that people have anxiety about. And then Jeffrey Goldberg says, and not for nothing. Not for nothing, it is important to understand that this is a problem in our country. This is not a problem of one party or another party. This is a problem of America. And this is something I've also spoken about. And the same Yom Kippur last year, when I spoke about the Jew hatred, I also spoke in a separate talk about the need for secular, liberal democracy. Doesn't mean everybody has to be secular. Religious people have a part in this too. And one of the things that I've discovered in these last few years is there are a lot of open-minded, even what you would call conservative religious people. Now, they're not open-minded about Jesus or heaven or things like that. They've got a theology. A lot of Jews have a theology too. Some of them we love and are dearly part of our own families. But they're very, very concerned that while they may be talking about freedom of expression in religion, that religion cannot drive the boat, neither can authoritarianism, because it's unconstitutional. It's not what the founders wanted, and they want what the founders want. And I've opened myself to hearing those voices. It happens on both sides. And here's what Yehuda says. Liberalism and pluralism are uncomfortable. It is uncomfortable. It's always been uncomfortable. This isn't easy. They're choir-building societies that make possible living together with difference and creating systems where sometimes you win in those systems and sometimes you lose. I love that. Because we have to accept that we may have a strong desire for a certain thing as Americans, and we're not always going to win. And we have to accept that because that's pluralism. That's what liberalism means, classical liberalism. And we have a balance of powers in this country. It's not the voice of the mob. They designed a democracy that's not a direct democracy. It's not Athens. But in any sense, he says everybody in the system respects the rules of the game. That's what a liberal society is supposed to do, and it works so long as everybody believes it. What I think he says we are facing right now in America, in many societies around the world, is that the attack on liberalism is taking place on both ends. The anti-liberal of effectively the populist right is sabotaging the belief that you need to respect norms, institutions, the rule of law, and win at all costs. And you do that partly by also sabotaging the other side, your opponents. The illiberalism of the left is also skeptical of the liberal pluralistic project. Right? That's what he says, right? This is now 15, 16 years ago, the story that he's going to tell. The critics that I got all the time were on the right. All the time he got critics on the right. They didn't like all that stuff that I talked about. Liberal Zionism, meaning a vision for Israel as a liberal democracy. And pluralism. The people on the right always said that sounded like lefty talk. And I'm going to tell you, I heard that too. It echoes for me. It was the right. But he goes on to say, in the past 6, 7 years, the only hostility he gets, is from the left. And I'm going to share with you, I feel that sometimes too. And he says this, I did not stop talking about the same topics. I didn't change my topics, my commitments. Neither did I. But suddenly pluralism, for instance, for progressives has become loser talk. I've heard that. Why do you continue to believe in things like the rule of law and the systems if the other side doesn't agree with it either, they ask. That is certainly, he points out, the case on many a college campus. Progressivism has played a major role in shutting down the pluralistic discourse that a university campus is supposed to inhabit. And if you're not paying attention to this, I beg of you to begin. Look at the Jewish Insider, a very centrist newsletter that will tell you what's happening everywhere in our country and in the Jewish world. Read the Jewish Telegraph Agency's daily submissions. You can subscribe to all of these things for free. The Forward sits further to the left of center. The Jewish News Syndicate further to the right of center. But organs like the Jewish Insider they give us a far more pluralistic understanding of what's happening. Back to Yehuda Kurtzer. Now we're stuck. We are. As an American Jewish community that forged its identity on the hybrid between American liberalism, again, the idea of pluralism, and a construct of Judaism that we wrote to have affinity with that American liberalism, we're stuck between an illiberal argument on the right, which is currently in power, and an illiberalism on the left, which will of course return to power, because that's how America always works. The minute you get to a place where the whole society doesn't believe in the premise of liberalism, it becomes harder and harder to sustain this position. Slide 5. Choosing sides has never worked for Jews. And that is a truth of Jewish history. And let me tell you, I don't know a lot about everything. I know a whole lot. I know a whole little about a lot of things, and mostly nothing about most things. But there's some things I do know about, and Jewish history is one of them. So he asks, what do we do as American Jews? Do we throw out our commitment? That's what the pessimists are asking, that we stop believing in the possibility of America being a liberal project. But I say back to the pessimists, that means you now have to choose a side. You have to choose, I want to be part of the illiberal right, or do I want to be part of the illiberal left? Now, this is where later, after the podcast had ended, he made the headlines, and it was in the headlines of mainstream newspapers that he said that he felt politically homeless. And that's where this came from. Now, he continues, you're back in a story of Jewish history and diasporas that never worked for Jews, which was, we'll choose a team until, and it'll be great, while our side, like the king, is on our team. And then lo and behold, when that changes, when you get out of the halls of power, you will be identified as the exemplar of that political attitude that can now be destroyed. And that is not healthy for Jews. He goes on to say, I don't think we have a choice as American Jews but to fight for the very liberal framework. Again, we're not talking about progressive left wing or this or that when he says liberal. We're talking about what you learned about it in school. That very liberal framework that resists the authoritarianism on the right and resists the authoritarianism on the left, and insists that this is the only way we make it work for ourselves as American Jews. And I've been saying that so long, and I have to tell you, that's probably why, in reality, I wanted to talk about this. So, of course, this is going to turn this conversation to how, in America, this started for the Jews. And sadly, some of it did happen during the first Trump administration when, on behalf of the diaspora, with no permission from us, Benjamin Netanyahu decided to throw his lot in with the American right. And it wasn't necessary. And at the time I said so. But he went into our polarization, again, not an American Jew, had every right to do what he felt was best for his nation, but half his people are here. I defend Israel's absolute right to flourish and exist as a Jewish state because half our people are there. And that's important. But it would have been nice, perhaps, and maybe too much to ask of this fella, if he had given some thought to us here. It did contribute to the Jewish participation in this polarization. Next slide, please. Optimism versus pessimism. What did he mean by that? Well, this takes us into Jewish history a little bit. He says, I think there have been two stories for Jews starting in the late 19th century, leading to now, that coexisted pretty well. So we have two major narratives, and these are not things American Jews think about a lot, because we weren't participating in this. We had our own thing going on, and it was a good thing. It was what he talked about earlier. But in the rest of the world, there were two narratives that became absolutely dominant. One was this dominant story of Zionism, which we will call the Judeo-pessimistic. What does that mean, pessimistic? It said, stop believing that the West will ever really make room for Jews unless Jews basically take power into our own hands and build our own state. Now, I happen to believe that at the time they came around, they were correct. 100% correct. They may still be correct. I can't deny that. Because what were they saying? Look at what's happening to us here in Europe. And then what were they saying? Look at what happened to us here in Europe. This wasn't 1945. This was from Captain Dreyfus, whose, by the way, ancestor was just given the laurels of a colonel in the Israel Defense Forces. This is not ancestor, descendant, I meant to say. These people said we must have control. We must have our own power because they're not going to do it for us. These were the Judeo-pessimists. And then you have the Judeo-optimistic story. Now, we're part of that story. American Jews are part of that story, who said, actually, we could find redemption in the West as long as we find a society with genuine commitment to liberal democracy. There was, by the way, another group of Judeo-optimists, the Bund. They've suddenly become very popular today with a very narrow group of Jews who, for whatever reason, have a lot of anger, and they have adopted the values of the Bund. Now, you may know what the Bund is if you took Natan's classes. This was a group of people, mostly Russians, but also Germans and others, Jews, who believed that Jews were a people, as we do, but also believed that if we could make the utopian Marxist communist revolution truly happen, it would save us, and we could be Jews, and we could participate in it, and every single one of them is gone. But the Judeo-optimists who survived were the ones who put their energy into this project here. Well, we were privileged to do it, because let's not forget, the Judeo-pessimists had reason to doubt America, because America closed its doors to them and our cousins, our brothers and sisters in the 1920s, as it did to most of the world. In any case, as American Jews, leading up to relatively recently, we were able to support both of those projects. It's a little bit of an irony. We both understood the Judeo-pessimists, and we were, in our place, optimists, which is why we never made mass aliyah. We didn't go en masse to Israel. Almost every other diaspora did. And the few that chose not to are reversing course today. It is, and I know this from many, many personal conversations and a lot of reading, it is the #1 conversation among the paltry population of Jews left in England, 250,000. When are we leaving? My family has been there, and they are still there for hundreds of years. I don't keep in contact with that side anymore, but I can't imagine that they're not asking the same question. We're not asking it yet, but we didn't have to ask it. Now, we did this simultaneous support for a Jewish state and Jewish power, and for building up an America that would both accommodate us and live up to its promise and values, without too much cognitive distance, he says, because I could say I support a kind of less liberal version of Israel than I support the liberal values in America, because I think the Jewish people need a Jewish state. I'm not going to argue with him right now. I think it's a much more dense discussion, but I know he knows that, and I don't have the time. But ultimately, most Jews did say, if the cost is a little less liberalism over there, in order for me to be able to pursue my own identity as a liberal over here, unbalance may be okay for the Jewish people. And the truth is, maybe I will argue with them a little bit, these were two different kinds of Jews in two different kinds of circumstances. One that was lucky enough to get into this country before 1923, and only in dribs and drabs even able to come over after 1945, and a whole world of Jews that had to go somewhere, and the where that they could go was undeniably back home and needed to build something different. He says, Jeffrey Goldberg asks, you're not finding any intellectual attraction in Judeo-pessimism over these last years? Well, if I was the Jeffrey he was asking, I would say, I never had that much problem with that. And doesn't mean I love Netanyahu. I got more critique for Netanyahu than you already know. It's not always what you think it is, because not everybody follows what the real critique should be. And the Gaza war, in my opinion, and I think everybody knows this, was not the problem. It was everything leading up to it and everything that's coming now. Everything. But it is a democracy, and they're going to have to make their own decision. But what Yehuda says is, it's a one-way street. Once you go down that road, that's where you are. Because pessimism remembers, and it's never falsifiable, because things can always get worse. Not going to lie. I'm in that place right now. I try not to. But, you know, that's the tension we live with as Jews. You want to aspire to values, but sometimes you want to look at the reality as you understand it. I don't expect everybody to go that way with me. Why? Because I am a classical liberal, and I want every voice to be heard. It's the optimists, he says, who have the harder job. And I do agree. And perhaps I'm not willing to take on that work just yet, but I do think about it all the time, so perhaps I do. And Jeffrey Goldberg says, but what if things are getting worse? Well, says Yehuda, the work gets harder. That's what an optimist says. He says, I'm drawn as a Zionist, and he still is, to understanding why that story became so significant, the Judeo-pessimism, for the rise of Zionism. You see it in Pinsker, Leon Pinsker. We talked about him in class this week because he was an inspiration of Emma Lazarus, her Zionist side, a woman who was simultaneously in the 1870s into the early 1880s when she tragically died young, both ways. A Zionist and a person who believed the American project was equally important. He precedes Pinsker. And I want to tell you something he wrote in a book called Auto-Emancipation. That was one of the first important Zionist works. It was what I read to the class from just briefly the other day. In Auto-Emancipation, Pinsker says that the Jewish people are going to emancipate ourselves. And then he goes on to quote from Hillel. But interestingly, as he points out, Yehuda Kurtzer, he says, if I am only for myself, who am I, is eliminated in the quote in the epigram of the book. Because for Pinsker, he wants it to be, if I am not for myself, what am I? And it was a moment in history, perhaps, that needed to be said. He says, I do think in very weird ways, we liberal American Jews need and needed some measure of that Judeo-pessimism as part of our Zionism to help make coherent our own liberal optimistic project. And if you've never read Louis Brandeis's statement on Israel in the 1920s, on Zionism rather, because there was no Israel yet, no state of Israel, I commend that to you. Google it. Read what he wrote, and you'll see both standing astride each other. Has October 7th done a job on me, also about my own pessimism? Of course it has. I hear terrible stories all the time. Let's go to the next slide. How am I doing on time? I'm okay. Pessimism protects, but it cannot build. And you know what? You can be both. I think that. I really believe it. He goes on to point this out. I know how afflicted students are on campuses. I know how afflicted people who work in various industries are. I've met with professors who are flocking to the Shalom Hartman Institute for help right now because they say, I went into this business thinking this was a liberal enterprise, but now I'm being excised out of that enterprise. This cancel culture, it's real and it's dangerous. And it is one of the most illiberal pieces of the left. And this isn't a competition between the left and the right for how to be more illiberal. It's a challenge for both to get their acts together. And for us as Jews to take on that prodding. Doesn't mean giving up our core political commitments. There are people who are more on the right in our congregation. It's not a lot. There are people who are more on the right in our movement. It's not a lot. But there are Jews who are, and there are more. And there are Jews who are on the left. And there's plenty of them. And there's a lot in the middle. But all of us as Jews have to commit to this American project. He talks about, he sees the appeal, but the appeal of pessimism cannot give us the tools to address the long-term solutions for our society. What it leads us to do is all sorts of things that have become more prominent in our agenda, like what? Like securing our institutions. Now, what are we left with? We have an illiberal left, an illiberal right. We have vandalism and threats on the left, from the left. We have vandalism, less so lately, but plenty of threats from the right. We've got Tucker Carlson and Candace Owen. We have Hassan Piker, and these people that you didn't hear about until you heard about it from me, and then you forgot about them, because I can tell you when I spoke about it, it was September last year on a Friday night. And they're all problems. They're all problems. And he goes on to say that this need now that we have had to focus in and take care of our own safety, it's a little bit humiliating. It really is. And also, it doesn't incentivize us as a Jewish community to say what is actually required of us in a moment like this. Not just to pursue safety, which we must do, by the way, but to be on the front lines of helping the society confront its challenges. So Jeffrey Goldberg goes on, slide 8, to say, I think we both believe that Jews only flourish in societies, civilizations, where there's rules of law, where there's a rule of law, where there's rationality, where there's tolerance as a moral value, not a concession. That ultimately, and I did speak about this again on the high holidays, you can see the things I've been obsessed with were so much a part of this discussion. That's what humanism is about. We can all attach anything we want to it. That's fine. I'm not giving you the rules of humanism. But what I am saying is that humanism, and certainly humanistic Judaism, is not a certain belief structure about a political point of view. It doesn't matter what it is, no matter how strongly we hold it. It is the promise that we will rely on reason, on our rational ability to think like adults, to engage in discourse civilly, and make up our own minds, and follow the rules. I was absolutely delighted when this state went over to independent districting commission. We worked hard for it. I worked hard for it. And I don't get involved in that many things politically because that's not where I have my time. But that I did. That I cared about a lot. Only to watch states on the left and states on the right completely tear it down around the country. So far, we have avoided that. Good for us, Michigan. But that is a concession to illiberalism. I wish it was in the Constitution, but it's not. So we have to rely on our own moral authority from reason to say everybody in this country deserves representation in our House of Representatives. Isn't that why we fought a revolution? Logic must be applied. The whole range of sober-minded democratics, this is Jeffrey Goldberg speaking, multi-behaviors that allow for thought as opposed to the formation of mobs. We don't need online mobs. We don't need in-person mobs. We need people who think for themselves and tolerate the ability of others. That's Jeff talking. Demonization is not the way we go. But today we are, as he points out, living in an age of the digital mob, a universal digital mob. And he asks, are we heading as a society irrevocably down that path? Now, I have long both bemoaned and celebrated the achievements of one Mark Zuckerberg, who invented social media, because, I like to scroll as much as the next person. I got my interests and things like that. I've learned ways to avoid a lot of the things that get me in the bubble. That's not easy, by the way, but you can get out of it. You can screw up your algorithm. And I did. I am now getting, this is just an aside, I get text messages. How the hell did they find me on text messages? From both parties all the time. Yes, both parties. I bet all of you don't get it from both parties. I declared that a victory for me, that they had now balanced out. I also learned that if I get particularly angry at one side or the other, if I say, go bleep yourself, I showed Miriam the text. It works just like when you send stop. Absolutely works the same way. I got immediately one of those things. You have been unsubscribed. But in any case, Jeffrey Goldberg says that people like Mark Zuckerberg actually believe that constant communication, unfiltered, instantaneous, well, that's a good idea. Now, of course, we know we're talking to bots half the time, more than half the time. But he, and that's why I wanted to share this, he thinks about it in relation to James Madison's understanding of human behavior. Madison believed that America was not going to survive the rise of daily newspapers because the daily transmission of new information was too much cognitively, he didn't use that word, but too much for human beings to bear. There would be too much emotion, too much anger, no time for things to settle. He thought, says Goldberg, that the greatest gift America had, the greatest attribute of America in terms of the primacy of logic, was that it was so big that it would take information a long time to travel. Oh, James, Jim, if you will. No, we don't even know now what's going to happen next because we got AI on our backs as well, too. And that could affect even the next election. All right. In the interest of time, I just want to do the next part really briefly. Yehuda Kurtzer goes on to talk about how we as Americans are lab rats, but he also talks about something very interesting about what Jews can give back. We are a people of the book. He points out that more Jews today, this is excluding Haredim, excluding ultra-Orthodox Jews, more Jews study Torah today than at any other period in all of Jewish history. And you can find this in the text. The rabbis were always complaining throughout all of Jewish history. Why don't they learn more? Why don't they observe more? You shouldn't think it was just like now that they started doing that and everybody was in cheder. No, they were working. It's like Tevye, misquoting and misunderstanding things all day long. Sure, they wished they could study, but they had to eat. And they lived in a world. This actually is a myth. The vast minority of people were anything but maybe semi-pious, semi-traditional, etc. What we're seeing today is massive Jewish engagement. And the more we are engaged, he points out, and I believe this too, or I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing for a living right now, in any way that we can engage Jewishly. Yes, of course, universalistically, but you know how to do that instinctively. I think of Bruce, who adopts and becomes a prophet for Musar, an amazingly important part of Jewish study and history. Speaks to many people. There are other things that say the same kinds of ideas, and you could find those too. But what he points out is that even as this is happening, so many of our institutional priorities are going off the choo-choo track. There's tremendous hunger now for Jewish sophistication. I, as you know, feel very attached to Hillel in general, and to my alma mater's Hillel, Texas Hillel in particular. It was a nice place for me as a kid. I loved going there with the other 15 kids who showed up on a Friday night, not the hundreds and hundreds who go there now, and the other hundreds and hundreds who are doing Shabbat at AE Pi or SAMI or SDT. The hundreds and hundreds and hundreds that showed up for their Israel fair, despite the fact that it was not necessarily welcomed by the surrounding protesters. And on and on and on I could go. People who reach out from our movement to Rabbi Jairus, who are not even Jewish, but have been on the fringes of our community and seek now conversion. This is not a trend only here, it is throughout the Jewish world. And that is something that we need to lean into. Getting back to the mob issue for a moment, Jeffrey Goldberg points out that online gambling on a weekly basis attracts over 50% of our young men in this country. 50%. Well under 50% of our young men in this country read a book every year. A book. Having lost our country's esteem for education in many ways, and that includes on the university campuses, where too much of it has become indoctrination, we open the door to the mob. Okay, so what about our priorities? I want to return to that as they did for a moment. I think this is slide I don't remember. Go to the next one. We're almost done. Current anti-Semitism. Just a few words about this because it also made the news. You know, we're spending a lot of money on fighting anti-Semitism. I don't know if you saw that ad during the Super Bowl. It's still playing. I mean, this is nonsense. These billboards, all they do is shame and name, or name and shame, as Kurtzer points out. we need to spend more money and more time on our own education as Jews. And I believe that that is a worthy investment. But in fact, it's not really just about the amount of money. It's $500 million that we spend on anti-Semitism, not security. Security we have to have. That's a whole different thing. People are out for us. We got to protect ourselves. But you know, he points out it doesn't have to be a zero sum. We can and must educate Jewish kids better about not just being good liberals, but about being good classical liberals, in the sense that America is a project that Jews helped build, in the sense that they understand what motivated Abraham Joshua Heschel to link arms with Martin Luther King Jr., or Joachim Prince, with whom he's Rabbi Joachim Prince, with whom he was dear friends. It wasn't just that they knew that this, that, the other needed to happen. It's that they knew the texts. They knew the tradition. They knew that this is what meant to be a Jew. So finally, we get to how some Jews are dealing with it. And this is where I thought maybe to cut a little bit. But I do want to share this. I don't know if you read Ezra Klein's article back on April 11th, his interview with Hassan Piker. The New York Times gave it two headlines. Hassan Piker is not the enemy, and another alternative headline online and elsewhere. This is why there's no liberal Joe Rogan. And his article argued that Democrats should engage with people like Hassan Piker rather than treating them as beyond the pale. He portrayed him less as a dangerous extremist than as a symptom of a broader failure by liberals to build wonderful ecosystems for young, alienated people to go to. And he denied Piker's Jew hatred, which I think we can all agree, I hope, is undeniable. The things he has said about Jews is unforgivable. And this man with the Totenkopf, who's now the favorite in Maine for the Democratic nomination there, and so forth and so on. These people, like the Carlsons, the Candace Owenses, the Nick Fuentes, have created a brand new room for people who think of themselves as progressives or left-wingers. And he says, what I found striking about this defense, which was framed as, hey, we have to talk to people we disagree with, but ultimately was this: we have to partner with demagogues in order to win elections. And I thought, no, you fight demagogues. I don't care what side they're on, you fight them. Here's an analogy he gave, a little piece of Jewish history. I love this one. In the year 63 BCE, the Maccabees and their descendants, the Hasmoneans, that's what their family was known as, the 63 BCE, the Maccabees' descendants, the Hasmonean Empire, was called dynasty, it was on its last legs. There were two brothers, the last of the competitors for the crown, Hyrcanus and Aristobulus. They were fighting over who could be in charge of the temple in Jerusalem. So they're the last heirs, and they were trying to defeat each other. One of them thought, hey, I know how I can win. I can partner with the Roman Empire. That is how the Romans came in. They were invited. And what happened 130-some years later? Jerusalem was in ruins. And another 60 years later, nary a Jew was left in the center of Israel, a small population having fled to the north. This is what happens when you partner with demagogues uncritically. This is what happens when you pick a side. And this is how I want to end. We must teach our children, we must, he says, create our society and have Jews teaching others how to do it that is immune to demagogues. And that does not mean engaging in obsession about what the demagogue is doing. It means engaging in what we need to do if it's our political side with our demagogues. And if it's their political side, to fight that, not with more of the same, but with our values as Americans, as Jews. And he asks finally, slide 10, I think this is where I stop, Yehuda, Jeffrey Goldberg, How would you organize? Well, I think I'm going to skip this part. So I think I'm going to end there because it's late enough. There's a lot more to say here, but I knew when I printed it out, because it's 55 pages, it is in 24-point font though, that I would never get to the end. So this is a good place to end. We can continue the discussion inside because I want to do the closing hymn, the closing song. Well, they used to call it closing hymn at my temple. I guess it's a hymn, right? Adon Olam. It's a hymn. Why not? Hey, who grew up in the Reform movement? We all had the Union hymnal. Right? The Union hymnal, which was how we knew what songs to sing. All right, thank you all very much. Shabbat Shalom. Hey, Joe, thank you for the streaming tonight. Arthur for the slides. And by the way, there's more to it than just advancing the slides because he helps me prepare them. And Joseph, thank you for the beautiful music, which we will now conclude.
And our closing hymn.
Our closing hymn.
Adon Olam Hu Shir Adam Ohev Chaim B'Haolam Kol Ole B'Shir Shalom Uv'Adam Nimsach Alom. Before our time the world began, and from that dawn our story ran. No hand unseen directs our way. We make our choices day by day. Through nature's law and life's design, we live the values we define. Through heart and mind, in joy and pain, we build the wisdom that we gain. Adon Olam, that song are we. Our world steered by humanity. Our love of life stirs songs of peace. Within us all such dreams increase. Adon Olam, Usher Adam, Ohev Chaim B'Haolam, Ole B'Shir Shalom, Uv'Adam Nimsach Alom.